Yeah, keep going. Oh, yeah.
Lights on here.
Yeah, I think the lights are probably not as bright as us. Sunshine. We'll see how it goes. How legible is this? Is it all right? Okay. All right, well, thank you for coming out. What we have discovered through this process is that we have been getting a number of people who come to these who are first timers, so to speak, like joining the conversation now, and some who've been along for the ride the whole time. So we're going to go, some of it might be things that some of you have been along for the ride the whole time have seen already, and some it might be all new. We try to kind of have a blend of information that we're presenting today, but really just kind of wrapping up the community engagement process that we've been through over the past 6 months, roughly, right? I'm Liz Kilker, Director of Planning and Community Development for the City of Grandview Heights, and I'll let our consultant team also introduce themselves.
I'm Andrew Saunders, a planner from Planning Next.
Hi, Sarah Bongiorno, Director with Planning Next.
Zach Savage, designer with Rock Collaborative.
Carmen Russo, principal co-founder of Rock.
And I'm Alex, I also work here for the city.
Great. So this evening, I'm going to give just a little bit of a precursor part of the presentation, and the consultants will take over from there. In terms of understanding a little bit better who's sort of new to coming to these this evening versus has been to one or more in the past, can I see a show of hands who this is new for tonight? Maybe a third of you. Okay. Well, so I'll just run through it pretty quickly, and then after this presentation, the consultant team will all be back here, I'll be here, and we can continue to talk about it, take your questions, further the conversation. So again, this is going to be a little repetitive if you were here last time, but just a reminder, why are we doing this? There's an opportunity, city's obligation and ability is to bring the conversation out into the community for residents, businesses, property owners, to come together, the city schools, library, come together and talk about what the future of the community might want to be in a coordinated way, and imagine a future for what that might look like. And then to engage a planning team to help us as we talk about what we might like, to interpret what we say and make that evident in built form. Also, we would anticipate that there will be projects. There have been projects in the past that have come forward. There will continue to be projects that come forward. We would like to have an idea of where we want to land with the accumulation of all those projects over time so that it adds up to something. And then also the city and the library and the schools, all the major institutions in town need to be able to plan for needed investments. For the city, it's our roads and other infrastructure. For the library, it could be a new facility. For the schools, their new campus needs to be sort of coordinated into the community. So there's a long-term planning vision that the institutions need to be able to plan around. So for all those reasons, also, why now? You know, if you've been in the community over the past 10 years, certainly you've seen a lot of changes, and even more in the past 5 years with the new school. There's a lot of changes on First Avenue that have occurred, changes in businesses, the change with COVID, with how people work from home or don't, or buy things from the stores or don't, go out to restaurants or don't, right? There's a lot of changes that have been happening, so very dynamic time in general. And then Central Ohio, also lots of growth going on right now, and it's projected to continue. I just read again that we're projected to be up to 3 million people in the Central Ohio area by 2050, so we need to just understand where we want to go as that growth happens. As I mentioned, the city has infrastructure investment needs. We're a 100-year-old city. A lot of our infrastructure is 100 years old. Sometimes it's the stuff that you see, sometimes it's the stuff underneath, the water and sewer lines. Collectively, we need to figure out a way to address those things, and they definitely need some investment in these areas. The new campus that I mentioned, the city has a new little park space on First Avenue, the library has some future considerations. All of those things, to have a coordinated result, need to be thought about together. And then also, for those of you who have been along since the beginning and maybe went to the first open house and really looked, you know, it feels very cozy here. I live here as well. But if you really look sometimes, it doesn't all look great. So we could make some improvements that would enhance our community character. Also very important, and I really, really, really kind of beg you to take this part to heart. We live here now, but whatever we decide and whatever we plan and whatever gets built is going to be here probably 100 years from now. So this is partly for us, but it's partly for our kids and grandkids and everybody else who comes after us. Also, it's not gonna happen tomorrow, so there's time to kind of get used to each incremental thing that happens. This is a list of plans that we have completed in the past 20 years or so, and roughly when they're projected to be done or generally done. Our Parks Master Plan completed in 2006, which resulted in the new pool, improvements to the Pierce Field Shelter, and to the Wyman Woods Shelter. The last project envisioned, major project in that plan, is under construction right now, whichever way I am, in McKinley Field, scheduled to be completed next month. So that's 18 years ago. It takes time. Grandview Yard, 2008, supposed to be finished around 2030. Grandview Crossing, 2006, again 2030. Spaces and Places, which kind of set up the school and the new municipal building, 2019, already 5 years down, and still work to go there as well. This plan is comprehensive enough and complex enough, we would anticipate something like a 20-year planning horizon that it will be serving. Again, some of you may very much know this, but for those of you who are just joining in, this is the last of our community open houses. We've had a really intense community engagement process throughout the summer, both with community as well as the schools and the library within the city with our city engineer. This is our last open house from here. However, there's more to do. So this is a last opportunity to kind of have a dialogue with the community here this evening. Our consultants are creating a draft plan document, the actual deliverable that will come out of this. We'll get that in the next month or so. Just because it's the holidays and hitting the holidays, we anticipate in January the Planning Commission will have a first look at it for consideration for adoption, adding their thoughts and educated guidance to it. And then we have identified a couple things through this planning process so far that we feel require further study before we would undertake zoning code changes that would reflect the plan recommendations. Those two major things are a parking count study to understand better how parking works in the catchment area, and the other is an economic analysis both for public and private entities looking at feasibility and fiscal impact. It's not going to be a nickel to do some of the public improvements that have been shown. Those are significant improvements. We need to look better at how much that might cost and therefore how long it might take to do. And then also, there's been a dialogue throughout the planning process about the level of density of some of the areas and finding the sweet spot between the small town charm and economic reality for private development, and kind of finding where those two can come together. So we're going to plan to do all of that next year before we would begin to undertake the zoning code updates and design guideline revisions that would codify kind of the vision that you're seeing in the plan. All right, so we still got a ways to go. Thanks for writing so far. You're not done yet. All right, and that's all I have. I'm going to turn it over to our planning team now to go over the actual work.
So this next section really looks at kind of what we did as far as the engagement for this process. Just to give a brief overview, if you haven't seen this plan before, this is kind of the boundary of the area. So it goes up to 3rd Avenue in the north, which is technically in Columbus, goes down Grandview Avenue to 1st Avenue, and then takes a westward kind of turn all the way over to Ashland. So this kind of area that isn't grayed out is what we're considering the planning area for this plan. Part of this, early on, we wanted to engage with the community, and there's a few different ways in which we've done that, and some of you have been a part of that process and are back again tonight, so thank you for that. So the first group was stakeholders. So there's a select small group discussions that were held with business owners or property owners, people that live in or near the district, just to kind of get from them what they thought should be in this plan, what considerations to take on. We're just getting our feet under us and trying to consider where this planning process would take us. Community engagement group was kind of led by the city in order to spread the word about the plan and kind of just get generally more people to, it was meant to be someone to be able to tell what was going on to a neighbor, so just kind of someone ambassador within the community. These open houses, so this is the 4th of the series of 4. So the first one, as you can see here, was outside on a less nice day than today, so maybe you wish the two were flip-flopped. And the last is the civic core teams. That was more so city officials, people who were kind of a little bit more on the inside of the planning process. There's a little bit of back and forth between our team and theirs to make sure anything that we were proposing was actually feasible from an engineering standpoint, or just kind of checking some of our planning visions with the reality of what it's like to be in the city. Just some images from that first open house. So there's varieties of different types of activities that were held. So in here you see boards. It's a little bit more of a science fair style, whereas this had a few more like stops just to get people out walking around within the district, different types of stations, so a little bit more interactive. It was very informative to our first just kind of pass at learning about what people value within the district. This is a familiar room, so this is the second and third open house, kind of in a similar type of format as we're having tonight. And then I'll pass it over to Sarah to talk about this.
Thanks, Andrew. Okay, so all of that great input we received in that first open house, which again, we were outside, we were out looking around at the district, and we had different stations and prompts to get input from folks. We then used that to create a vision statement and some guiding principles to help be that North Star for us throughout this process. So we developed those from input received in the first open house. We then tested those back at the second open house. So if you were with us, you had a chance to review those and give us any comments or feedback and kind of give us a rating. When we looked at that input, we found that they rated really well, but there were some tweaks, some wording, some things to kind of make them resonate a little bit more for folks. And so that has been updated, and on the screen in the back you can see the sort of final vision, the final guiding principles that really were that North Star to make sure that we were upholding what people want to see generally in the district. We then developed what we're calling some development principles, which really focuses more in on the physical design, so trying to put some imagery with some descriptive titles and words to help kind of bring to life using precedent imagery what we wanted this district to be. So those are also back boards in the back you can take a look at. But again, these are sort of overarching, high-level aspirations and sort of North Star for us as we continue through this process. And I'm going to turn it over to Carmine to go through analysis, the district analysis.
Yeah, so our job was really to look at the public realm and try to evaluate it as it exists today and what improvements could be made that could make it more feel like this is a cohesive district. One of the things that we did, and I think all of these are on the Growing Together website, right? So I can't really go through every one in detail right now, but you can jump on there and look at these yourself. But we tried to analyze property use, so property owners. So obviously we have on first the library, the new schools, some of the green areas you see there to consider, more of the community type spaces. Then there's private property owners along the edges, and then there's also physical public space, right-of-way space that we started to look at and what that would mean. Green space, most of the green space is consolidated at the library and the schools. Not a lot of green space in the area. Could that potentially be improved? We looked at the retail activation and the storefronts, and obviously Grandview Avenue has a lot of that. Not so much on First, but there's a little bit, right? And so there's some convenience retail there that people started to really gravitate towards, that we'd like to have a lot more of that. Parking was a big issue, this idea that there are parking zones, but sometimes they're used during the day, sometimes at night. Maybe there's a better way for all of these businesses to talk to each other and consolidate parking, maybe have a parking strategy for the district. Just the walkability of the district, thinking about, I'm always amazed, when we have like the hop or something or a big gathering, like where do people actually park and what's the walkable distance someone's willing to park to get to some of these restaurants. And so knowing that we have limited parking in some of these areas, just throwing that 5-minute walking radius on there, and as a general planning principle, about a 10-minute walk is the most someone would really walk. So you can see that second circle is really that 10-minute walking radius. So it's just something to consider as you think about people's walkability from parking. Mobility and transit, it came up a lot, was not only is Link Us on the ballot, maybe that might happen, but just thinking about people that come here by bus or other means of mobility. Lots of people brought up, could we shuttle between our different business districts on a Friday and a Saturday night, just other ideas about how people move about the neighborhood. And then just land use and zoning, and considering, you know, current use and what's currently applicable to someone that might want to redevelop a property, and maybe how that might want to change to facilitate this vision. So I think in February when we did the walking, this was meeting number 1, one of the things that we really tried to focus on was that street experience and that public space and what people see on a regular day. So this is all existing condition. And one of the things that I would point out is just sort of those like dark things you see there, the buildings right on each side. These are cross sections of the street as you move through. It's a 60-foot right-of-way, basically on First and on Grandview Avenue. So it's limiting, but at the same time, if you devote a little bit of that back to people, there might be a potential to have some more public space. So you'll see that in some of the future renderings, what that means. But what you'll notice in each of these cross sections is there's not a lot of consistency on First Avenue. Sometimes the buildings are close to the street, sometimes there's parking lots, sometimes there's some far away. So it's not necessarily the nestled pedestrian experience that you get on Grandview Avenue, so it's something to think about. When you make the turn and go up to Grandview Avenue, you also have varying conditions. You've got some buildings that are 3-story, as you see here, like the Masonic and the building across the street there. But then as you start to move north, you know, you start to vary in scales of buildings and, you know, distance from right away to the building face, but also the heights. So it's something to think through as it relates to the pedestrian experience. What that led us to was this framework for the study, which is this diagram that kind of guided us. So the 4 big things that we studied through this, which are, you know, visible on the boards behind you. The idea that there are 2 streets, First and Grandview, and we know there can be improvements made there. Sidewalks, not all those areas are ADA accessible. Some of them are not great from a sidewalk width or experience, and so there's public improvements that could be made. There's the area we called, which was actually called out in the Spaces and Places plan, I think from 2018, the education and community hub area, which is the schools, the library, really thinking about how those things work together. Thinking about where those areas in orange, those private development opportunities where there might be an owner that exists there that wants to redevelop their property or might be in talks to do that, and so thinking about what that might want to look like. And then that overall district parking strategy. From the streetscape perspective, and now I'm going to start to transition into things we heard from the community in some of the open houses. So, you know, I think a lot of people recognize that Grandview Avenue has a lot of destinational retail on it. A lot of people felt like that's like our main street in Grandview. First Avenue, because it's really the longest street and it connects everything from east to west. A lot of people felt we came up with this term, the community connector. It really connects everyone in the community. It's more for strolling, biking, things like that. So that impacted the street designs that we shared, and I think this was the second meeting. So this is the existing, what you see here, and some of the ideas that we shared. So this was adding bump outs into the street, much like you're seeing on the east side of First right now. But the second concept really started to get a lot of traction. We started to get a lot of positive feedback on this one, called the Linear Park Greenway, which you started to think about maybe some type of shared mobility pathway on the north side of First Avenue through the district that could help connect from the schools to Grandview Avenue, and it could be for strolling, for any types of different mobility, and kind of pull people off the street into more of a tree-lined pathway. So that's really what we got a lot of good feedback on. When you think about Grandview Avenue, this is the existing condition, but we started to think about how you could bump out the curb a little bit, create more walkability on both sides of the street, and try to get more passable sidewalks, but then also maybe some street trees in there, more places for seating. A lot of people say, I'd love to grab a coffee or ice cream and be able to sit outside and not feel constrained by, cars and people moving around me. So can we create more public space actually in the streetscape? So that's what people started to really gravitate towards. So this second concept of what we call the retail promenade was really what people like, maybe some more open pits with some seating for trees and things like that against the bank block. So we broke this down into character zones, and again, this is something that we heard a lot of feedback on, but it also represents the physical space that you look at, and you'll see those in the 3 boards, like up against the windows on that side. But the idea that there's this more community zone where the schools are and the library, which this one is zone 3, that transitions into more of what we call the lifestyle zone, where there's some of that, what we call convenience retail, and a lot of people, again, that live even on both sides, north and south, were saying, it'd be great to have more little bakeries or little places that could support more of that convenience of living in the neighborhood. And then Grandview Avenue being more for that restaurant type destinational retail. So for each of these sections, you'll see a diagram, and we have those again up on the boards to the right, or against the windows on this side. But it just hints at the things that people were saying and the things that we talked about. I'll try to give a quick highlight because I know we want to get to the boards, but you know, maybe there's an idea to talk with the city of Columbus, even though Third is in Columbus, that maybe there could be some type of gateway element or some type of signage or something there as someone was to come south towards the bank block, that you're welcome to Grandview type situation. All the red dots are, we had a lot of conversation about all the curb cuts that come out onto Grandview for cars. And is there a way maybe to reduce some of them, consolidate some of them, so you don't have some of these weird scenarios where cars are pulling out and they can't really see, and really try to prioritize for pedestrians. The little green zones we were proposing, maybe you don't allow cars in there, and talking with those owners, some of them are public right away, and so could you make those maybe outdoor little seating alleys with public art or some string lights or something so people could sit in them, and you don't have so many cars coming out onto the street. So that led us to more of a development diagram, which is this one, which leads you to the boards in the back as well. In the convenience area, some similar things you could see in the red, a lot of curb cuts in this area, so again, trying to consolidate that. Trying to also consolidate parking on the rear sides of these buildings, because there's a lot of small parking lots that are serving each of those different parcels. Is there a way we can consolidate that parking and provide better for any future use that might occur in there? Again, thinking about a gateway zone at First and Grandview as well, which led us to this development diagram, which is reflected in the boards in the back. And then as we get to the community zone here, this was really this bigger conversation about, we started to talk about the future of the library. The schools have just been redone, as Pila's said, and is there a possibility to create better connections between the public library and the schools? Maybe create areas with that big bubble you see in the middle is like, could we potentially close the street at times when there's big events or the music on the lawns, and try to create more of that festive environment in the street, and really utilize the public park space that we have in that area, which led us to this diagram as well. So I'm going to let Zach finish here on the vision, and
So this is the vision plan that we got to, and Carmine touched on. A lot of the previous points in all the analysis that in all of your guys' feedback that went into this plan. So, and this is blown up on the board in the back there. But what this plan will reflect will be the 3 zones that were talked about, and the potential right-of-way improvements that could be made, and then some potential low-density opportunity zones that we uncovered throughout this process the last few months. So then we'll start with this first zone, this destination zone. Right now you're looking at Second and Grandview here in this parking lot. And so this was a rendering from a previous presentation, thinking about the vision of how we could better utilize this space, just with some strictly cosmetic upgrades, and how different the interaction can be for the community here. Second zone is here at the intersection of Grandview and First, and thinking about how if some of these low density zones that could be converted into new development, how that can blend in with the existing architecture and the existing massings and fill in those gaps between the 2 zones. And lastly, here's a bird's eye view of potentially an actual connection between a new library and the middle school, and how that green space can play a large part in creating more of a campus feeling. And then if the library does scoot over a block, how that block can be redeveloped again for a new low density development. And so here we're going to walk through, this will be an existing view, and then the next view will be a visionary rendering, and these renderings are all 3 in the back of the room there. So this is the lifestyle zone. This is Grandview Avenue looking south. On the right hand side of the image you'll see the theater. And so this would be potentially the vision plan for what you'll notice here. There'll be the curbs bumped out, so you gain back some public space. There's planters with seawalls, additional room for street trees, improved paving materials, and the street gets a bit narrower, but it creates that better feeling on the street for a pedestrian when they're on the sidewalk. And then the redevelopment zones potentially showing how those massings fit in with the existing massings, with the theater on the right and the Masonic building down off to the left, and trying to meet the two buildings in the middle, showing how potentially architectural styles could play a part in the character of this area, stepping the building back at times, how awnings and street furniture can help really give this area, invigorate some life in between just south of the bank block getting you down to the intersection. This lifestyle zone here is again at the intersection of First and Grandview, but we're looking west now with the Masonic building on the right. And so this rendering, you'll see the street again bumped out a bit to create more of that pedestrian space. And then moving west down the street, something similar to the last rendering, having that street character with the furniture, with the canopies, the different building materials on the potential redevelopment site. And then you can see the distance the Abington, so trying to keep a similar scale to the two buildings in between. And you also see the community connector path with sort of center left. You'll see these two rows of trees where that connector can really act as a way to move people up and down First Avenue and get them off of the road. In this final rendering here, this is the community zone, and so this is on First Avenue. The school is off to the right. The library is in the distance to the left. And so in this rendering, the vision would be that if the library at some point moves, it could scoot over east by one block and have that connection with the school. And you'll also notice that in this scenario, there'll be bollards at the intersection there, so that mid-block could be closed down and you could have events. There's a direct connection between the library and the park and the school, and it feels more of a campus environment. There's also a pavilion and stage in the park as well.
Anything else?
Yeah, let's appreciate it. So, rather than have that conversation 25 times around the room, we thought we'd put out as much information as we could in a group. But now all these lovely folks will be around the boards in the back. Invite you to hang around, ask questions, provide additional information that will continue to enrich and inform the plan, and we'll be here for another hour if you want to hang out with us for that long. So with that, we'll break. And we're going to set this on loop, so if you want to come up and